I don't see the possibility of failure. Not when you can learn from everything that you've done.
Meghan Markle had just unleashed a barrage of shocking statements aimed directly at the British royal family, specifically launching a vicious smear campaign against Princess Kate. But behind this deafening media circus lay a smokescreen masking a filthy crime. While public opinion was being manipulated by the war of words, a staggering $15 million had completely vanished from the Archewell Foundation. This blood, sweat, and tears money was being stealthily converted into briefcases of cash to bribe Cartier executives, paving the way for her extravagant jewelry collection, the crown of the people. Thinking she had pulled the wool over the world's eyes, Meghan had no idea she had just stepped into a death trap. Not bothering to retaliate against the slander, Kate opted for a dead silence. Quietly enlisting an underground network of financial investigators from Washington, the Princess of Wales had secured the fatal evidence, the complete bank statements, proving money laundering through a web of shell companies. A financial time bomb had been coldly planted, just waiting to be detonated right in the middle of the red carpet at a Parisian gala. The questions hung in the air. Would Meghan's saintly mask be humiliatingly ripped off in front of hundreds of global billionaires? How disastrously would this fraudulent empire collapse when the cold-blooded evidence was exposed? And how would Princess Kate deliver the final punishing blow to end her enemy once and for all? Modern royal warfare never begins with the clash of dented swords or poisoned chalices sneakily hidden up sleeves. It begins with dark, razor-sharp headlines printed en masse across millions of tabloids littering newsstands from Los Angeles to New York. On Monday morning, a dark media storm struck. A slew of entertainment outlets simultaneously released malicious clickbait headlines. Princess Kate manipulates Kensington Palace, the dictator holding royal heritage hostage, and Meghan Markle stripped of Princess Diana's diamonds, the truth about cruel discrimination. In her sun-drenched, secluded and lavish mansion in Montecito, California, Meghan Markle was enjoying her morning. Dressed in an expensive silk robe, legs crossed on a custom-designed velvet sofa, she casually held a meticulously crafted latte. Her eyes glided across her iPad screen, rereading the abusive lines aimed at her sister-in-law. A half-smile, smug and arrogant, crept across her face. These articles weren't a media coincidence. It was a meticulously, coldly, and ruthlessly orchestrated smear campaign. Anonymous sources had been paid hefty, under-the-table sums to weave a distorted narrative painting the Princess of Wales as a greedy, selfish gatekeeper, hoarding historical jewels behind the palace's closed oak doors. Meghan knew her audience all too well. She grasped the psychology of a segment of the American public that hungered for overturned fairy tales. They craved the motif of a woman ruthlessly oppressed by a crumbling feudal power, relentlessly crushed only to rise powerfully from the ashes. By playing the deeply aggrieved victim, denied even the right to touch family heirlooms, Meghan was draping herself in a martyr's cloak, sparkling with faux sympathy. And just as the public was seething angrily, cursing Kate across all social media platforms, Meghan unleashed her second blow. A setup so flawless, it was sickening. At exactly 12 noon, as the mob's outrage reached its peak, the prestigious fashion magazine Vogue dropped a globally shocking exclusive. The cover photo hit millions right in the face. Meghan Markle, proudly, her head held high, wearing a blindingly radiant solid diamond necklace, the exquisitely cut gems gleaming with the light of ultimate power. Standing right next to her, sporting an equally smug smile, was the global brand development director of Cartier in Paris. The accompanying press release was as sharp as a slap to the Prince and Princess of Wales. Meghan Markle had officially secured the partnership of the century with the luxury empire Cartier, preparing to launch an exclusive jewelry collection named the Crown of the People. The article's preface was written in provocative, arrogant terms. "We do not need to bow to jewels stained with feudalism. This is the era of autonomy. A true crown belongs to the people forged from independence and courage. Millions of fanatic fans immediately hailed her as a goddess breaking all chains. Meghan took a sip of her coffee, her chest heaving in triumph. She firmly believed she had used public opinion to crush Kate's dignity while single-handedly establishing her own luxury empire without needing the palace's handouts. But thousands of miles away across the Atlantic, behind the fortified stone walls of Kensington Palace, Princess Kate remained entirely unshaken by the noise and chaos outside. Not a single tear of frustration fell. There were no hysterical phone calls to her press secretaries demanding corrections or justifications. Kate, born into a middle-class business family where all value was measured by hard work and practical calculation, never let herself get sucked into the media's illusions. Upon entering the royal family, her sharp head for numbers hadn't dulled. It had grown keener than ever. Standing by the large window of her study, Kate took a quiet sip of black tea. Her cold eyes weren't glued to the beauty of the diamonds on Meghan's neck. They were fixated on the deadly absurdity hiding behind that photograph. Cartier wasn't some newly emerged fashion brand desperate for attention through cheap scandals. It was a centuries-old luxury empire serving the global ultra-rich and royalty whose work ethic and partner vetting processes were notoriously rigid and ice-cold. For a colossal conservative and politically risk-averse brand like Cartier to agree to produce an exclusive collection named after a scandalous polarizing figure like Meghan, the partner would have to deposit an astronomical sum of matching funds. That deposit would serve to guarantee all design and production costs, commercial risks, and potential reputational damage. In Kate's practical experience, that deposit would never be less than 8 figures, tens of millions of dollars paid up front. Kate lightly tapped her long, slender fingers on the oak desk. Where did the money come from? Her logical mind immediately analyzed all revenue streams. The lucrative podcast contract had collapsed in disgrace. Film and media projects were stalled with no new releases. The cost of maintaining an ultra-luxurious lifestyle, a massive security detail, and the California estate was burning through the last dollars in their accounts. A massive, clean sum readily available to wire straight into Cartier's banking system couldn't just materialize out of thin air. Nor could it come from shrewd investors who always demanded clear returns. Crime, no matter how perfectly disguised, always leaves a distinct stench, especially when the perpetrator is too desperate to bask in the spotlight. Kate instantly spotted a fatal financial loophole. A dark, illicit river of money was surging beneath the feet of the self-proclaimed goddess of the people. That noisy media smokescreen was merely a cover for a blatant heist. Kate didn't need to publicly clear her name. She decided she was going to crush her enemy's lifeline. Over the next 48 hours, the media network paid by Meghan continuously launched new provocations. A slew of analytical pieces from pseudo-experts was pushed to the front pages, drilling deep into the royal family's inferiority against the former actress's global influence. In Montecito, Meghan constantly refreshed her email inbox eyes, glued to live bulletins from London. She and her team were waiting thirsting for a retaliation from the Prince and Princess of Wales. They had set a perfect trap. If Kate or William spoke up to justify themselves, even with a single sentence, the war would instantly devolve into a muddy mud-slinging match in the press. And in that mud, Meghan was always confident she'd be the victor because she had no dignity or majesty left to lose. But Kensington Palace maintained a dead silence. Not a single press release, not an internal leak, not a single photo capturing Kate looking haggard or angry. That absolute silence began sending chills down the spines of the masterminds in California. It was by no means cowardice or resignation. In the Game of Thrones, noise belongs to frauds desperately trying to prove themselves, while stillness belongs to seasoned hunters slowly drawing their bows, locking their targets in their sights. In the most strictly secured room of Kensington Palace, where regular cellular signals were blocked, Kate slammed the thick oak door shut. She coldly refused all consultation meetings with media crisis experts. She didn't need empty advice about soothing public opinion or rebuilding her image. She needed people who knew how to tear away that glamorous facade and drag the foul-smelling financial garbage into the light. From the drawer of her safe, Kate retrieved a satellite phone that stored no contacts. She directly dialed a long, encrypted number, calling a hotline in Washington, D.C. The person on the other end wasn't the police, nor were they slick lawyers in tailored suits. It was a figure living entirely in the shadows, a former financial intelligence agent, now running a brutally ruthless network of private investigators. This organization catered exclusively to the elite doing the dirtiest of jobs, hunting down the dirty money of plutocrats, tracking the dark transactions of politicians, and exposing fraudulent business empires. They weren't fictional hackers sitting in dark rooms typing bright green code to breach banks. They were pragmatic old wolves, manipulating information with money and power. They used stacks of dollars to bribe disgruntled bank tellers, unearth evidence buried in public tax filings, buy off real estate brokers, and patiently tail briefcases of cash moving across borders. Kate's voice rang through the secure line, devoid of any emotional turbulence, cold sharp and aiming straight for the target's jugular. "I don't care about those stupid smear articles. I want a complete detailed dossier on the money flows that have entered the escrow account of Cartier's Paris branch over the past 3 months. Ignore all of her public statements. Find the newly established anonymous trust accounts. Dig up every shell company. Find the real named owner and the absolute root of every single penny." The brutal hunt was officially activated. No administrative paperwork was signed. No round-table meetings were held. Only a decree of financial extermination issued from London. Meanwhile, in California, Meghan remained lost in a dizzying illusion of power. She was busy booking the most expensive first-class flights and handpicking dozens of magnificent evening gowns from renowned designers to prepare for the global launch gala in Paris. She raised a glass of fine red wine, mocking the royal family's cowardly silence, smugly believing she had successfully trampled on the dignity of the future queen. Meghan was completely unaware that right beneath her feet, the ice was cracking. Every reckless expenditure, every squiggly signature on her bank checks was now being closely trailed by a pack of invisible bloodhounds, ready to tear her apart without mercy. Enemies can hide their greed with flowery words, but the trail of dirty money is never a perfect straight line. As soon as the order came from the Princess of Wales, the DC Financial Intelligence Network immediately extended its tentacles into the murky swamp of transactions Meghan had painstakingly built. Using dark connections in European financial hubs, the investigative team used thick briefcases of cash to outright buy information from a transaction broker in Paris. They obtained a basic list of the money flows pouring into Cartier's accounts. The initial results matched Kate's sharp predictions. The massive sums slammed onto the luxury brand's negotiating table did not come from humanitarian sponsors or angelic private investors, as Meghan shamelessly peddled to the press. It was being stealthily funneled through a trust registered in Delaware, a tax haven hidden right in the heart of America, where owner identities are protected by dense legal shields. But to the DC financial hounds, that was only the first layer fragile and full of holes. Top-secret reports were continuously sent to Kate's desk in London via sealed diplomatic pouches. The investigative team tenaciously followed the reverse money trail from Delaware. They traced how the funds were further split and pumped through 2 media companies registered in the Cayman Islands. These companies were in reality empty shells, employing no actual staff and producing no content, existing solely as rusted post office boxes. And when the investigators used bribes to buy off a corrupt legal clerk in the Caymans, the identity of the authorized proxy behind those mailboxes was exposed, none other than Meghan's personal CFO, the man who closely shadowed her every schedule. The money had traveled in a perfect circle, carefully laundered through multiple tiers and countries to mask its true origin. But no disguise, no matter how sophisticated, can withstand the power of betrayal bought by money. The final wall crumbled when the DC detectives set a trap in California. With an undeniably massive payout, they successfully bribed a deeply disgruntled internal auditor who had just been unjustifiably fired by Meghan's faction. This individual, carrying both hatred and greed, smuggled out the entire Root dossier. The ultimate truth broke out ruthless, filthy, and utterly shocking. The origin of this multi-million-dollar cascade didn't stem from any corporate conglomerate or legitimate profit. It flowed directly out of a place that was supposed to be a symbol of altruism, the Archewell Foundation. The brazenness had crossed all boundaries of human morality. Meghan Markle had callously dipped her hand into the donation bag of the wretched. The funds that were solicited and raised from all over the world, complete with televised tears, to raise public awareness, protect mental health, and support vulnerable women, had now been blatantly gutted. The human rights activist and mother of the public facade was torn to shreds, exposing the true form of a money-hungry fraudster who coldly used the public's blood, sweat, and tears as financial leverage. She stole money from the poor to feed her addiction to the glamour of luxury, draping diamonds around her neck to satisfy her vanity. This crime wasn't merely a legal violation. It was the lowest, most despicable trampling of trust and morality. 2 weeks passed in a heavy tension-thickened silence, and then the DC detective team delivered the decisive blow. Through an inside informant bought with cash, they seized the physical evidence that would dictate the life or death of the war. These weren't vague emails that could easily be denied. They were a stack of original heavy bank statements embossed with the red seal of an international auditing firm. Late at night at Kensington Palace, Kate personally used a letter opener to slice the envelope's seal. Under the quiet yellow light, the statements appeared as sharp and ruthless as knife strikes slashing down on the oak desk. The first page clearly showed exactly $15 million had been gutted from the Archewell Foundation in just 48 hours under the brazen guise of emergency humanitarian expenses. The second page, half of that money, was wired straight into Cartier's escrow account in Switzerland. That was Meghan's golden ticket into the French elite. But the absolute revulsion lay on the final page. The remaining $7.5 million were chopped into dozens of anonymous transactions, pumped directly into the personal accounts of 3 Cartier executives in Paris. Kate gripped the statement, her knuckles turning white. Those weren't service fees. That was bribery. Meghan had taken money from the poor to stuff the mouths of greedy executives, paving the way for her extravagant collection. The heartless villain trampled on destitute lives just to drape diamonds around her neck. The corner of Kate's mouth twitched into a sharp, unforgiving line. She gathered the entire blood-soaked corruption file into a black leather folder and snapped it shut. The weapon was loaded. Kate's only job now was to choose the most magnificent moment to press the detonator, stripping her enemy's mask off in front of hundreds of the world's elite eyes. The gala in Paris was about to begin. Autumn in the City of Light, Paris, always possessed a glamorous and haughty beauty. But tonight, it was chosen as the graveyard for an empire of lies. The global launch gala for the Crown of the People collection was set to take place in the gold-gilded Grand Hall of the Ritz Hotel, the pinnacle symbol of extreme luxury. In the most opulent presidential suite on the top floor, Meghan Markle stood before a classic gold-rimmed mirror. 4 assistants bustled around her, carefully lifting the solid Cartier diamond necklace and placing it around her swan-like neck. The weight of the precious stones touching her skin made Meghan shiver with delight. The sparkling light reflected in the depths of her eyes, blazing with an unconcealable arrogance. Meghan looked at her own reflection, smugly, believing that tonight she would officially step onto the peak of the world, kicking aside archaic royal rules and trampling Princess Kate under her crystal-studded heels. The guest list tonight was a declaration of power. 300 billionaires, America's most formidable media tycoons, A-list stars, and notorious fashion editors. Every camera flash was fully charged. However, Meghan had no idea that thousands of miles away, the noose had been pulled tight. Kate could easily have sent these statements to British tabloids to create an immediate scandal. But no. The class of a true purge lies in choosing the right weapon and the right arena. Entertainment magazines only bring whispers, but the financial press brings annihilation. At Kensington Palace, Kate placed the black leather envelope containing the original statements, the list of shell companies, and the bribed account numbers into a secure steel lockbox. It was dispatched via express diplomatic courier, flying straight to the desk of the editor-in-chief of the most powerful financial newspaper in the world, the Wall Street Journal in New York. Accompanying that blood-soaked dossier was a single cold demand. The publication embargo must be strictly maintained until exactly 8 p.m. Paris time. That was no random time. 8 p.m. was the exact moment Meghan Markle was scheduled to step onto the podium of glory, raise a glass of champagne, and speak before hundreds of billionaires. Kate had calculated the delay of cruelty down to the very second. She would let her enemy climb to the highest rung of delusion, fully basking in the brightest light, only to chop that ladder down with her own hands. The financial time bomb was armed. The ticking of the clock echoed coldly into the void. The Grand Hall of the Ritz Hotel at 7:45 p.m. was drowned in melodious symphonies and the scent of expensive perfumes. Hundreds of the world's most powerful guests raised limited edition champagne glasses, conversing politely. The global brand development director of Cartier stood in the center, his face flushed with complacency, constantly shaking hands with investors and bragging about the collection's magnificent breakthrough. 7:55 p.m. The massive mahogany doors swung wide open. Meghan Markle walked in like a queen. A floor-sweeping silk evening gown, a meticulously rehearsed radiant smile, and the $15 million diamond necklace blindingly shining on her chest. The crowd parted, clearing the path for her to approach the podium, covered in white roses. The stage lights converged, shining directly onto the victor's face. Exactly 8 p.m. Meghan adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and projected her familiarly expressive voice. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not just a night of jewelry. Tonight we celebrate truth, transparency, and the power of women who dare to stand up against oppression. A message notification chimed, then 2, then 10. In just 10 short seconds, a bizarre and chaotic sound ripped through the elegant atmosphere of the Grand Hall. Hundreds of iPhones and Blackberries belonging to billionaires, tycoons, and editors vibrated violently in unison like an earthquake. The symphony orchestra could not mask this anomaly. Elegantly dressed guests frowned, lifting their phones to look. And then the smiles on their lips froze. The temperature in the ballroom suddenly dropped to 0. Right on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the financial website every billionaire in this room had set emergency alerts for flashed a blazing red razor-sharp headline. Exclusive the charity facade. $15 million of Archewell funds siphoned to purchase Cartier jewelry. Right below that earth-shattering headline, there was no lengthy commentary, only high-definition scans of the red-stamped bank statements. Meghan Markle's exact name, the exact sending account numbers, and most brutally of all, the exact personal Swiss account numbers of the 3 Cartier directors who received the bribes. On the podium, Meghan didn't even have time to finish her second sentence. She realized a sudden suffocating silence had gripped the hall. The hundreds of eyes staring at her no longer held admiration. It was pure disgust, contempt, and utter revulsion. It felt like hundreds of daggers plunging straight into the saintly mask she had just put on. The Cartier director standing in the front row slowly pulled his phone out of his suit trousers. Just glancing over the screen, the blood completely drained from his face. Pale as a corpse. His hands shook violently, unable to hold on to his champagne glass. The crystal glass dropped straight onto the marble floor, shattering into 100 pieces, splashing the expensive liquid onto the trouser hems of the guests standing nearby. That sound was the straw that broke the camel's back. The plot twist had exploded right in the chest of the elite. The crown of the People collection wasn't forged from courage. It was molded from blatantly stolen charity money. The deceit was stripped bare, leaving absolutely nothing to hide behind at the very moment of its greatest radiance. The upper-class order operates with extreme ruthlessness. They might forgive arrogance, but they will absolutely never forgive cowardly thievery that dirties their hands. No police sirens needed to sound, no courtroom needed to be convened. The punishment struck instantly bloody and unforgiving. A tech billionaire who had once generously donated $2 million to the Archewell Foundation slammed his napkin down on the table, without so much as looking at Meghan once he turned his back and took long, decisive strides out the door. That action served as a signal to retreat. A slew of investors, CEOs, and A-list stars simultaneously spun on their heels. They backed away from the podium as if avoiding a filthy plague. The rapid footsteps, storming toward the exits, crushed the white rose petals scattered on the carpet. On the podium, Meghan stood frozen, her trembling lips unable to utter a word. She desperately tried to reach out to salvage the situation. "No, everyone, this is a misunderstanding. The British royals are framing me." But no one bothered to stop and listen to a fraudster acting out the rest of a wretched play. Less than 5 minutes later, from a side door, the high-level internal security team from Cartier headquarters in Geneva burst in. They wore no police uniforms, but they radiated a chilling murderous intent. Leading the pack was the vice chairman of Cartier's board of directors. He completely ignored the trembling branch director. Marching straight to the podium, the vice chairman looked at Meghan with the disdain of someone looking at a pile of trash. Without a single word, he signaled 2 female security officers to step forward. They unceremoniously unclasped the $15 million diamond necklace from Meghan's neck right in front of the frantically flashing lenses of the few remaining paparazzi. The contract was instantly ripped up based on morality clauses. The physical proof of her extravagance was stripped away in the most humiliating manner possible. Meghan utterly collapsed. She staggered down from the podium with no one left to support her. Outside the Ritz Hotel, the phones of her assistant team rang incessantly. Sounding the death knell, major banks were simultaneously freezing her credit accounts, while former sponsors sent legal notices demanding compensation and the return of their donations. In just one night, the facade of power, fame, and artificial wealth was completely stripped away, leaving her empty-handed, abandoned, and despised by the very society she had always yearned to join. At the same time, in a completely opposite world, inside the quiet study at Kensington Palace, London, Princess Kate sat with her back straight in a leather armchair. The light from her computer monitor illuminated her elegant, sharp features. The front pages of global newspapers were flooded with images of Meghan being stripped of her jewelry and fleeing in disgrace in Paris. Kate reached out, picking up her bone china teacup to take a small sip. The tea had gone cold, but its astringent taste was absolutely perfect. There was no loud, triumphant smile. There were no celebratory toasts. Everything had played out exactly like an execution order being carried out, brutal, precise, and leaving absolutely no trace of the royal family. The enemy had set her own house on fire. She was simply the one who slammed the door shut. The order and honor of the crown had been protected by the absolute power of the truth. Kate extended a slender finger, calmly closing her laptop. Darkness swallowed the room, engulfing the image of her struggling foe. The disastrous collapse of the Archewell Empire in Paris was a bloody but flawless victory. The Princess of Wales had proven to the world she didn't need a crown on her head to rule the battlefield with the cold mind of a hunter. However, as Kate stood up to leave the study, her eyes accidentally drifted over the final original statement, still lying on the oak desk. Her fingers halted. A cold chill ran down her spine. Beneath the bribery transfers to the Cartier directors, there was still one extremely small transaction, sophisticatedly blurred out, which the DC detectives hadn't noticed in time. An anonymous transfer worth $2 million was separated from the stolen funds, not wired to France, but bounced back to a domestic account at an old private bank in London. Kate pulled out her phone, quickly typing the receiving account's identification code into the underground data system. 3 seconds later, the returned result made her heart stop. That account number didn't belong to Meghan nor to any shell company. It was registered under a closed trust fund, under the direct management of a senior royal family member living right within the walls of Buckingham Palace. Meghan Markle might be a thief, but the one who opened the door of the charity vault for her, the one who facilitated this betrayal, was someone who shared the same blood. The external enemy had fallen, but the real dagger was hidden right under the pillow. Kate's eyes darkened. This war had truly only just begun. What darkness Buckingham Palace was hiding remained to be seen. The true identity of the royal traitor who had secretly aided in this $15 million heist was now the ultimate mystery. Whether Meghan's humiliating downfall at the Paris gala was enough to pay for her ultimate deceit, or if she still had a chance to turn the tables by blackmailing her royal accomplice, was a question that hung heavily in the air. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.